The woman staring back at Rachel Collins in the mirror didn't look anything like one of the most successful CEOs in the retail industry. Gone were the signature blonde curls and confident posture that usually defined her public presence. In their place stood Karen Blake, a middle-aged woman with tired brown eyes, streaks of grey in her hair, and department store clothing 2 sizes too big. Rachel took a deep breath and adjusted the outdated glasses perched on her nose, an accessory chosen specifically to dull her polished image. The transformation was complete. She looked like a woman desperately searching for a second chance at life. It was exactly the disguise she needed. Rachel's company. Collins Retail had become a household name over the past 15 years. She had built it from a single neighborhood store into a national brand. But recent signs pointed to something rotten beneath the surface, and Rachel was done ignoring it. 2 weeks earlier, she'd received a cryptic text from Melissa Harding. Her former HR director and longtime friend Melissa had resigned abruptly the month before, something Rachel hadn't questioned until now. The message was short but urgent. Something's wrong at Collins. We need to talk privately. That next morning, Melissa's hands had trembled over coffee as she detailed what had been happening since Rachel stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on international expansion. Mitchell's changed everything, she said, referring to Mitchell Grant, the COO Rachel had personally mentored and promoted. He's cutting wages while profit reports magically climb. People who speak up are either transferred, laid off, or fired. I started asking questions, and the next day there was a termination letter with my name on it. At first, Rachel thought Melissa might be overreacting. Mitchell had always been a numbers guy, cold but effective. But something about her friend's fear stuck with her. Rachel decided to dig quietly. She pored over internal reports, ran cross-checks on store-level data, and the more she saw, the more alarmed she became. Profit margins didn't align with sales performance. Staff turnover had nearly tripled. Bonuses had disappeared, replaced with ambiguous performance improvement plans. The brand she had built on trust and integrity was starting to look like a corporate shell game. Still, confronting Mitchell head-on wasn't an option, not yet. If he really was corrupt, he'd bury the evidence or pin it on someone else. Rachel needed to see things from the inside, without boardroom filters or PR spin. That's when the idea for Karen Blake was born. The plan was straightforward, but risky apply for a job at one of her own stores, the original Collins retail flagship in downtown Seattle. It was the first location she'd ever opened, and the irony of returning to it as a job applicant wasn't lost on her. This store had once represented her dreams. Now it would serve as the battleground for her truth. Rachel arranged everything carefully. She rented a modest car, left her luxury wardrobe behind, and used an old friend's address to create a believable employment history. She applied under her alias and waited. Within days, she received a call from the assistant manager inviting her in for an interview. "We're a little short-staffed," the voice on the phone said. "Can you come in tomorrow?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice calm, but her heart racing. That night, as she lay in a small rental apartment not far from the store, Rachel found herself gripped by something she hadn't felt in years. Fear, not fear of failure. She'd failed before and rebuilt, but fear that the company she loved had become something unrecognizable, that in her pursuit of growth and expansion, she'd lost touch with the very foundation of her brand. She remembered her father's words when he'd helped her launch Collins Retail with a small loan and an even bigger vote of confidence: never build a company bigger than your values. Had she done just that? Her eyes lingered on the neatly folded uniform laid out on the dresser, an unremarkable beige shirt and black pants. Tomorrow she'd walk into that store not as its founder, but as a new hire, and for the first time in a long time, she wouldn't be in control. At 7:15 a.m. The next morning, Rachel parked in the back lot of the store and sat in her car watching employees file in through the side entrance. There was no laughter, no casual conversation, no energy, just tired bodies and guarded eyes. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, willing herself to stay calm. This was no longer a theoretical investigation. Whatever had gone wrong inside Collins Retail was now personal. The tension in the air was real, and if Melissa had been telling the truth, there were people inside who were scared, silenced, and suffering. Rachel adjusted her glasses one final time and stepped out of the car. The moment her shoes hit the pavement, she wasn't Rachel Collins anymore. She was Karen Blake, retail associate, hopeful, and she was here to find the truth, no matter the cost. The moment Rachel stepped into the downtown Collins retail store, a strange chill crept over her. It wasn't the temperature, it was the atmosphere. The lighting was slightly too harsh, the displays were just a bit off kilter, and the signature scent she'd once insisted be piped through every location was absent. Gone was the welcoming, carefully curated ambience she had obsessed over during the company's early days. In its place was something sterile, mechanical. Rachel stood near the entrance for a moment, absorbing the space like a customer might. Employees moved briskly past her without offering a smile or greeting. The energy was flat, the spark gone. A wave of sadness hit her. This wasn't just a poorly run store. This was a reflection of a company in decay. She adjusted her Karen Blake persona, tugged nervously at the collar of her blouse, and approached the customer service desk to announce her interview. She was led to the break room, a place Rachel had once designed to feel like a cozy lounge. Now it smelled of burnt coffee and bleach. The couches were gone, replaced by hard plastic chairs, and a vending machine blinked forlornly in the corner. She sat alone, listening to the quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead, wondering if anyone else noticed how soulless this place had become. After 15 minutes, the assistant manager finally arrived. "Sorry for the wait," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're understaffed today." His name tag read Brandon Harris, and Rachel immediately noted the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremble in his hands as he held the company-issued tablet. The interview began with generic questions: previous retail experience, availability, reasons for applying. Rachel recited her rehearsed backstory with precision. Recently divorced, eager to re-enter the workforce, open to flexible shifts, Brandon checked boxes without making eye contact. It was when Brandon stepped out to process her application that everything changed. Rachel sat in silence for a moment, staring at the lifeless break room wall when she heard two muffled voices coming from the storage room next door. The walls were thin, cheaper drywall than she remembered authorizing years ago, and the voices carried clearly. Tonight at the Harborview Hotel, a woman whispered her tone. Sharp, Mitchell's making his big move. A man responded lower, but equally tense. "The books are already cooked, but if anyone finds out about the offshore accounts—" "No one will," the woman snapped. "The old lady's too focused on global expansion to notice a few missing millions." Rachel froze. The old lady, that had to be her. She slid closer to the wall, straining to hear more. The voices grew quieter, but she caught fragments. Investor meeting, final phase buyers ready. Her heart pounded. Offshore accounts, missing millions. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was fraud, organized, strategic theft. Rachel barely had time to process what she'd heard before. Brandon returned, holding the tablet like it weighed 100 pounds. "Good news." "Ms. Blake," he said, "we'd love to have you on board. When can you start?" The words barely registered. Rachel's mind was spinning images of spreadsheets and balance sheets flashing through her memory. "Tomorrow," she blurted, perhaps too quickly. Brandon nodded, seemingly relieved. "Perfect. Orientation is at 6:30 a.m. As she left the break room, Rachel glanced toward the storage room, half expecting to see the two employees emerge, but the hallway was empty. She walked out of the store in a daze, the once familiar green and white logo above the door now feeling like a stranger's signature. She had come to investigate rumors. She had found a criminal operation. And whatever was happening at the Harborview Hotel that night, it was clearly central to the entire scheme. She drove home in silence, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The weight of what she'd overheard pressed down on her chest. If Mitchell was planning a secret investor meeting to move stolen money, she needed eyes on it. This wasn't something she could report to the board. Just yet, they'd demand evidence, and Mitchell was too experienced to leave an easy trail. She called Natalie, her former HR director and closest confidant, as soon as she got through the door. "You were right," Rachel said, before Natalie could even say hello. "It's worse than we imagined. Mitchell isn't just cutting corners, he's siphoning millions, and tonight he's meeting with investors at Harborview." Natalie didn't hesitate. "I'll grab the gear. We'll need high-resolution audio, at least one hidden camera and a second vehicle. I've been itching to use that old surveillance kit anyway." Rachel let out a shaky breath. "You've done this before. Let's just say I dated a private investigator once." Natalie replied, long story. That night, as Rachel pulled into the parking garage across from the Harborview Hotel, she felt a clarity she hadn't felt in months. The fear was still there, but it had been overtaken by purpose. She wasn't just here to expose financial wrongdoing, she was here to reclaim her company. Collins Retail had always stood for something more than profit. It had been about people, opportunity, and integrity. Mitchell had perverted. That vision turned it into a tool for greed. But tonight marked the beginning of her fight to take it back. She adjusted the brooch on her coat, actually a camera. Natalie had retrofitted and looked out across the city. Somewhere inside that glowing tower, her company's future was being sold piece by piece, but not if she could stop it. Rachel Collins wasn't a CEO in this moment. She was a woman on a mission, and no one, not even Mitchell Grant, was going to see her coming. The cold morning air bit at Rachel's face as she stood in line outside the employee entrance, her ID badge clipped to her outdated beige uniform. She glanced around at the other employees waiting silently beside her, heads down, arms crossed, eyes distant, no chatter, no shared smiles, no sense of camaraderie. It felt less like the start of a retail shift and more like soldiers preparing for a battle they were destined to lose. At 6:45 a.m. sharp, the door opened and a severe-looking woman with a clipboard barked names with military precision. Blake Karen, she called, eyes scanning Rachel with suspicion. "You're late. Orientation started at 6:30. Rachel blinked. The schedule said 7. The woman's lips curled into a condescending smile. "The schedule changed. That's your first strike. 3 strikes and you're out. Understand?" Rachel swallowed the instinct to push back. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, stepping through the threshold into a building she had once opened with joy and now entered as a stranger. The woman was Diane Miller, the new regional manager Mitchell had hired, while Rachel was away overseeing the expansion. Rachel had never met her in person, but she'd heard murmurs about Diane's reputation, ruthless efficiency, no tolerance for excuses, and a love for metrics over morale. Diane ushered the new hires into a cramped training room where the lights flickered and the air smelled faintly of ammonia. Over the next 4 hours, Rachel endured what could only be described as psychological warfare disguised as onboarding. Diane's presentation was devoid of warmth and filled with threats. "This isn't a charity," she declared. "You meet your targets, you keep your job. You fall behind, you're gone." She introduced a daily sales quota system that Rachel knew was mathematically impossible to sustain. The commission program had been gutted, replaced with an opaque performance scoring matrix. "Each department has daily KPIs," Diane said, tapping a spreadsheet on the projector. "Miss your number twice in 1 week. That's a strike. Enough strikes, you're terminated." A young man raised his hand cautiously. "Excuse me, ma'am, these quotas are almost double what they were last month." Diane didn't even look at him. "Strike 1. Tom questioning metrics is insubordination." The room went silent. Rachel noted his name badge, Andrew Chen. Her heart twisted. He couldn't have been older than 22. She made a mental note to talk to him later. The air thickened with tension as Diane continued her lecture, now moving into a series of rigid policies. Tardiness, bathroom breaks, lunch durations, all carefully monitored and weaponized. "Extended bathroom breaks are a strike," Diane said flatly. "Multiple customer complaints. Strike too many returns. Strike every sentence seemed designed to remind employees that they were disposable." Rachel sat motionless, seething inside. This wasn't just bad management. This was a system designed to break people. During their meager 15-minute lunch break down from the 30 minutes the company had previously allowed, Rachel found a quiet corner of the break room and sat down with a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like metal. A petite young woman dropped into the seat next to her and offered a soft smile. "Rough morning?" she asked. "You could say that," Rachel replied. "I'm Emily Torres," the woman said, offering a hand. Rachel introduced herself as Karen. Emily couldn't have been more than 20, yet the weariness in her eyes suggested a lifetime of overtime shifts. "You picked a tough time to start," she said. "This place used to be amazing. Good benefits, people actually cared, but ever since Mitchell Grant took over, it's been like this. Everyone's just surviving." Rachel listened carefully as Emily described the new, normal, unrealistic expectations disappearing, bonuses and mysterious transfers. "Jenny from electronics asked about our holiday bonus," she whispered. She was sent to a location in rural Alaska 2 days later. Just then, Andrew Chen walked past, nodding politely before grabbing a half-crushed granola bar from his locker. Emily gestured toward him. "That's Andrew Smart Kid, used to be full of ideas. Now he barely speaks." Rachel watched the young man's hollow expression and wondered how many more like him were suffering in silence. "Why do you stay?" she asked Emily. "Because I need the paycheck," she answered with a half laugh. "And because I still remember what this place used to be. Collins Retail used to mean something. Now." She trailed off her gaze, drifting toward the hallway where Diane's voice echoed like a warning bell. Before Rachel could reply, Diane's voice cut through the break room. "Lunch is over. Back to your departments." Emily stood quickly. "Welcome to the front lines," she said softly, before disappearing into the crowd of blue uniforms. The afternoon shift was worse than the morning. Diane implemented what she called dynamic efficiency protocols. A cruel twist on friendly competition, departments were pitted against each other for sales, with the lowest performers shamed during evening roll calls. Rachel watched as chaos unfolded. Customers left frustrated due to understaffing, and employees grew aggressive in pursuit of quotas. She saw one associate get written up for taking a 6-minute bathroom break. Another received a strike when a customer complained about a return policy. And when a register came up 37 cents short, Diane made a public example of the cashier. Rachel felt sick. This wasn't leadership. It was abuse cloaked in policy. She glanced around, noting how everyone moved with robotic precision, eyes down, spirits dimmed. The store might have still carried her name, but the soul she'd once poured into every aisle and end cap was gone, replaced by fear. As her first day came to an end, Rachel gathered her things slowly, mentally cataloguing every moment, every injustice. She needed to remember everything, not just for evidence, but because this was what her people had endured while she looked the other way. Emily passed by again, whispering, "Don't park in the employee lot tomorrow. Diane likes to tow cars that aren't perfectly aligned in their spots. Happened to me last week. Cost me $200. Rachel nodded in thanks, touched by the small kindness. "How do you deal with all this?" she asked. Emily hesitated, then shrugged. "I just handed in my 2 weeks' notice. Couldn't take it anymore. But funny thing is, I feel guilty, like I'm abandoning ship. I used to believe in this place." Rachel watched her go, heart heavy. She didn't just see a struggling young worker. She saw the legacy she had failed to protect. The clock was ticking. Mitchell's damage was deeper than she imagined, but now she had a name, a face, a reason she would fight. Not just for her company, but for every employee Mitchell had crushed along the way. The stockroom was dimly lit, cluttered and unusually quiet compared to the chaotic retail floor just beyond its doors. Rachel found herself stationed there after Diane abruptly reassigned her post-lunch, claiming her personality might be better suited to back-of-house logistics. In reality, Rachel suspected it was a silent warning. She had asked one too many questions that morning. But for now, she welcomed the opportunity. The stockroom offered a rare pocket of calm and, more importantly, access to a different layer of the company. the behind-the-scenes reality no customer ever saw. The air was stale, and the concrete floor echoed slightly with each step. Rachel quickly noticed something off. Shelves were misaligned inventory, poorly tracked, and labels often missing. The room didn't reflect the streamlined operations she had designed years ago. Whatever systems had once been in place were now crumbling. It was during her first hour stacking boxes of household cleaners that she met Jason Reed. He moved with a quiet authority, tall and lean, wearing a slightly faded Collins retail polo and a badge that read Senior Associate. 8 years. His eyes held the same tired resilience Rachel had seen in Emily and Andrew, but there was something sharper in his gaze, an awareness, a guardedness. New, he asked without turning his head as he scanned a clipboard. Started today, Rachel answered. Name's Karen. Jason nodded slowly. Welcome to purgatory. His tone was dry, almost bitter. Rachel smiled politely, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. It wasn't always like this, Jason continued unprompted. Used to be a decent place to work, real benefits, actual people in leadership who gave a damn. Now, he shook his head. Now it's just quotas and fear. Over the next few hours, Jason began to open up carefully, deliberately. He spoke of co-workers who had been quietly let go after years of service, usually following a poor performance review that didn't match their track record. They call it streamlining, he said, but we all know what it is. It's targeted purging. Get rid of anyone who questions the system. Rachel pressed, gently asking about the missing bonuses employees kept referencing. Jason looked around before answering. Gone stopped without warning. Holiday bonuses, annual incentives all disappeared last year. When Jenny from electronics asked about hers, she got reassigned to a store in the middle of nowhere. Real subtle Rachel could feel the fury simmering inside her. These weren't just policies gone awry. This was a deliberate effort to dehumanize and displace. Mitchell hadn't just shifted the culture, he'd weaponized it. Then Jason said something that made Rachel freeze. Thing is, the money didn't vanish. It moved. He paused, watching her reaction. You hear things in here. Loading docks, late-night inventory. Counts, closed-door meetings. Some of us know more than we should. Rachel kept her expression neutral, though her heart was pounding. Know what exactly, she asked. Jason gave a non-committal shrug. Offshore accounts, reallocated budgets, quiet buyers. I've seen enough to know something's up, but not enough to stop it. Not alone, his voice was low, cautious. And let's be real, people who dig too deep here, they don't last. Rachel recognized the hesitancy in his tone. Jason wasn't a whistleblower yet. He was a man standing on the edge of a moral cliff, unsure if the fall would be worth the leap. She considered revealing who she truly was in that moment, but it wasn't time. Not yet. Back on the floor, the pressure only intensified. Diane had begun her efficiency. Rounds, unannounced inspections disguised as performance checks. Rachel observed how she wielded her clipboard like a weapon, flanked by a junior supervisor who tallied infractions as though they were scoring a game. Employees were now being publicly ranked by sales per hour, stockroom output, even customer interactions. The department with the lowest productivity was forced to clean bathrooms during closing shifts. Rachel watched one team leader break down in tears after Diane accused her of underachieving leadership. What disturbed Rachel most wasn't just Diane's cruelty, it was how normalized it had become. No one pushed back. No one resisted. The culture had mutated into a hierarchy of fear. Ambitious workers turned on their colleagues and veterans stayed silent, afraid their history with the company made them targets. Late that afternoon, as she refilled paper towels on aisle 6, Rachel caught sight of Jason again, this time in the back corner of the store, quietly speaking with one of the junior cashiers. Their conversation ended quickly, but she noticed him slip a folded paper into his pocket as he walked away. Something about the way he moved, alert, scanning, strategic, told her that Jason wasn't just aware of the corruption. He was part of it, or at least had been, maybe reluctantly. Maybe not, But he wasn't just a bystander. That night, Rachel sat in her car and stared at the darkened store through the windshield. The secrets weren't buried deep. They were in plain sight. Stolen wages, intimidated staff, a chain of command built to punish. But she also saw cracks. People like Emily, Andrew, and Jason, they hadn't given up entirely. Not yet. And that gave Rachel hope, because if she could pull on the right thread, the whole operation might unravel, and Mitchell Grant would finally have nowhere to hide. The Harbor View Hotel shimmered like a crown jewel against the Seattle skyline, its glass facade catching the evening light and reflecting a city unaware of the deception taking place inside. Rachel sat in the dark corner of a parking garage across the street, a cup of rapidly cooling coffee in her hand and a brooch-shaped camera fastened securely to her coat. "Testing, testing," came Natalie's voice through her earpiece. "Mic is hot. Camera feed looks sharp. You sure you're ready for this?" Rachel exhaled slowly. "I've never been more ready," she replied. Natalie, ever the pragmatist, had outfitted them with a full surveillance setup, worthy of a private intelligence team, high-res body cameras, encrypted wireless audio backup recordings. What had started as an HR professional's concern had now evolved into a covert sting operation, and tonight was the night they would catch Mitchell Grant in the act. Across the street, Rachel spotted Jason Reed's black SUV pulling into the private lot reserved for high-level guests. "He's here," she murmured. Jason's entering through the north entrance. Moments later, two sharply dressed men exited a Tesla and followed him in. Natalie's voice crackled again. "That's Marcus Webb and Robert Taylor, both from the corporate accounting division. They're Grant's inner circle." Rachel felt her heart rate spike. The pieces were falling into place faster than she had expected. Mitchell Grant wasn't just hiding misconduct. He was orchestrating a corporate takeover built on theft. Her stomach turned as she imagined her company, her legacy being sold off to the highest bidder, its bones stripped for profit by people who had never even worked a register. "I'm heading in," she said, pushing open her car door. "Don't lose the signal." Inside the hotel, Rachel navigated through the side corridors with practiced ease, following Natalie's directions via earpiece. "Take the service stairs to the third floor, then through the maintenance corridor," Natalie instructed. "The Cascade Room has a balcony that overlooks the meeting area." Rachel followed the path quietly, finally reaching the balcony, tucked behind heavy curtains. From her vantage point, she could see a long conference table surrounded by figures in sleek suits. Jason stood off to the side, visibly tense, at the center like a spider. At the middle of a web was Mitchell Grant. He looked as polished as ever, tailored suit, calm demeanor, but to Rachel, he radiated danger. "Gentlemen," Mitchell said, "raising his glass tonight is the culmination of 18 months of meticulous planning." Marcus turned his laptop around to reveal graphs and spreadsheets. "We've siphoned approximately $47 million from Collins Retail through strategic cost-cutting measures, eliminated bonuses, slashed wages, and reallocated inventory." The room remained silent, the weight of the figure settling like fog, and the potential buyer, Mitchell asked Roberts, stepped in. "Summit Equity Group. They're sending their representative tonight. Preliminary offers are north of $300 million for a controlling stake in domestic operations." Rachel's fingers tightened around the railing. Her jaw clenched. "They're selling the company out from under me." Jason suddenly spoke, voice low and uncertain. "Rachel Collins would never agree to this. She still holds the majority." Mitchell's laughter echoed through the room. "Rachel is busy playing international visionary. By the time she realizes what's happened, the board will have no choice but to approve the sale. Declining performance, high turnover. It'll all look like leadership failure." The conversation took a darker turn. "And what about the missing money?" Jason asked. "The offshore accounts, the fake records." Mitchell's expression darkened. "Unfortunate necessities," he said smoothly. "We needed a fall guy, and let's face it." "Jason, You've been cooperative, but if you back out now, I'm sure federal investigators would love to hear about your role in our creative accounting. Jason's hands clenched at his sides. That's not what I signed up for. Yet here you are, Mitchell, said voice cool and menacing, fully complicit. You either see this through or become the first to fall when the ship sinks. Rachel could see Jason's conflict, the flickers of guilt battling with fear. He hadn't expected the scheme to go this far, and now he was trapped. Her heart ached for him, even as she silently willed him to do the right thing. The room shifted as a woman in a designer suit entered Mr. Grant, she said crisply. Charlotte Wells, Summit Equity. Mitchell stood to greet her, all charm and confidence. Miss Wells, we're ready to proceed. My team has prepared full financial overviews, and you'll find our growth strategies. Fraudulent, stolen, and criminal. Rachel whispered to herself, eyes burning with fury. She slowly backed away from the curtain, prepared to slip out and regroup with Natalie. But her elbow brushed a metal utility railing, creating a faint clang. Mitchell's head snapped toward the sound. What was that? He barked. Probably just hotel staff, Marcus replied quickly. This floor has balcony access for cleaning. Check it, Mitchell ordered. Rachel's pulse thundered. She darted around the corner of the balcony, hoping the shadows would conceal her escape. Natalie, she hissed into her mic, I need an exit. Now pull the fire alarm. Natalie said, panels on your right, just past the curtain. Rachel ran for it. Just as heavy footsteps hit the top stairwell, she slammed her palm against the alarm. A shrieking wail erupted through the building. Below, chaos erupted. Mitchell swept documents into a briefcase as hotel staff flooded the conference room, announcing an immediate evacuation. Jason froze mid-step eyes, flicking toward the noise, then toward the curtain. Their eyes met. Rachel unsure if he recognized her through the disguise. He didn't react, just turned and melted into the fleeing crowd. She used the panic to slip back through the maintenance corridor, down 3 flights of stairs, and into the mob of confused guests pouring into the night. From a safe distance, she watched Mitchell and his team hastily retreat to their cars, briefcases in hand plans undone. Beside her, Natalie approached quietly. Did we get everything? Rachel nodded, every word, every face. And now we bring them down. The fire alarm's shrill scream tore through the cascade room like a blade, cutting off Mitchell's slick presentation mid-sentence. Rachel ducked low behind the curtain, heart pounding as red emergency lights began flashing overhead. Voices rose in confusion and urgency. Chairs scraped back, and hotel staff rushed in announcing an immediate evacuation. She didn't wait. She slipped from the balcony entrance into the narrow maintenance corridor, moving quickly but cautiously. Every step echoed in her ears, amplified by adrenaline and panic. Behind her, heavy footsteps grew louder. Someone had followed the sound from the balcony. She rounded a corner, pressed herself flat against the wall, and waited as 2 hotel security guards rushed past, talking into their radios. Rachel took the chance to bolt down the stairwell, skipping steps and gripping the railing to keep balance. Every nerve in her body was on fire. This wasn't just surveillance anymore, this was survival. When she reached the lobby level, she merged into the crowd of confused hotel guests being ushered outside. Her disguise still intact, wig glasses, drab coat, she moved with the flow, blending in. Outside night air hit her like a wave, cool and sharp, but it did nothing to calm her nerves. She scanned the lot across the street and spotted Natalie standing next to their vehicle, clutching a tablet and mouthing, "You okay?" Rachel nodded quickly, but her eyes remained fixed on the hotel entrance. Moments later, Mitchell emerged with Marcus and Robert flanking him, their faces tight with fury. Mitchell was shouting into his phone, gesturing aggressively. Then came Jason, trailing a few steps behind, his expression pale and unreadable. He paused near the valet station, and for a second, just a second, his eyes locked with Rachel's. She held her breath. Did he know, did he recognize her? Despite the disguise, Jason didn't give her away. He didn't signal or react. He simply looked at her for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then turned away and disappeared into the night. Rachel's chest tightened. That moment of recognition wasn't imagined. She knew it, and yet he hadn't said a word, hadn't blown her cover. He'd protected her. Why? The same man who'd been sitting in that meeting, who'd been part of the scheme, had also made a silent choice. He was in too deep, maybe, but he wasn't entirely corrupted. Not yet. Rachel got in the car with Natalie and slammed the door shut behind her. "We need to go," she said. "Now." Natalie pulled into traffic as Rachel pulled off her wig and let out a long, shaky breath. "Did you get it all? Audio and video?" Natalie replied, holding up the tablet. Multiple angles. "You caught them red-handed." Back at Natalie's apartment, the living room had been converted into a makeshift command center. Laptops, external hard drives, and piles of notes covered the dining table. Rachel paced the floor as Natalie played back the footage Mitchell outlining the theft, the offshore accounts, the sale to Summit Equity, Jason's protests, the threats, the whole house of cards laid bare in high definition. "This is more than enough for the board," Natalie said. "It might even be enough for the FBI," but Rachel shook her head. "It's not just about exposure. It's about timing. Mitchell's already moving fast. If he suspects we're onto him, he'll start wiping everything. We need more internal documents, bank records, email chains. We need to tie him directly to the financial manipulation, not just in whispers, but in black and white." She paused, staring out the window at the quiet street beyond. "And we need." Jason Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Jason, the same guy helping Mitchell steal your company." Rachel turned to her. "He's scared." "That's obvious. But he hasn't completely sold out. He had a chance to out me tonight. He didn't." "Maybe because he wants to stay alive," Natalie countered. "Or maybe," Rachel said carefully, "because part of him still believes in what we built. If we can get him on our side, he might be our way in." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the hard drives. Rachel's voice softened. "I trusted Mitchell once, and that nearly destroyed everything. But maybe I was right to trust Jason, at least enough to give him the choice." Natalie sighed. "Then we better act fast. Mitchell won't wait around to lose control." Rachel nodded. "Tomorrow I go back to the store. This time not just to watch, but to act." She spent the rest of the night mapping out the next moves. They needed legal muscle people who understood corporate fraud and could move quickly. Rachel reached out to an old friend, Michael Rodriguez, a high-profile attorney who had helped her during the company's early expansion phase. "I need your firm's services, and I need access to your forensic team," she told him on a late-night call. "I have proof of criminal activity, but we need to build an airtight case." Michael didn't ask many questions. "Send what you have. I'll bring the team. And yes, I'll bring the federal contacts too." Rachel hung up and looked around the room once more. This wasn't how she ever imagined taking back her company, not through boardrooms or marketing campaigns, but through grit, truth, and fire alarms. She thought of the employees back at the store, Emily Andrew, even Jason people caught in a system that had turned against them. "We go tomorrow," she said to Natalie, her voice steady now. "We finish what we started." By the time Rachel arrived at the store the next morning, the energy had shifted. It wasn't just tense, it was volatile. The usual dull rhythm of morning setup had been replaced with urgent whispers and darting eyes. She stepped through the employee entrance and was immediately met by Diane Miller's sharp voice cutting through the air. "All employees are required to report to the office for mandatory background verification," she announced, clipboard in hand like a judge delivering sentencing. No exceptions. Rachel froze in place. Her heart skipped. This wasn't routine procedure, it was a trap. Mitchell was accelerating his plan, and he was doing it fast. The fire alarm at the Harbour View had spooked him, and now this sudden policy shift wasn't about security. It was about flushing someone out. Her disguise, as carefully crafted as it was, wouldn't survive a detailed check, and Mitchell knew it. Diane pulled Rachel aside mid-shift and handed her a form. "Sign this. Corporate audit requires all new hires to be cleared before end of day." If not, you won't be allowed on the premises tomorrow." Her voice was flat, almost smug. Rachel took the paper and stared at the small print. Submitting the form would instantly expose her true identity. She needed more time, but there was none. "We've had some concerning coincidences," Diane added, like fire alarms being pulled at just the right moment, like surveillance footage that mysteriously cuts out. Strange, don't you think? Rachel forced herself to nod and walked away, her hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just about paperwork. Mitchell was starting to hunt. If she made one wrong move, everything and everyone could fall with her. As she passed through the break room, she locked eyes with Jason. Something about his expression made her pause. He looked pale, haunted, and scared. She found him an hour later in the stockroom, stuffing crumpled papers into a shredder. "They're going to pin everything on me," he muttered without looking up. "Leonard's people, Mitchell's people are already rewriting history. Every email I sent, every spreadsheet I touched, they're going to say I acted alone." Rachel closed the door behind her. "Then don't let them," she said softly. "Help me finish this." Jason finally looked at her, and for a long moment he studied her face. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You're not who you said you were," he said. "You're Rachel Collins." She didn't deny it. "I am, and I'm here to save the company before he sells it for parts." Jason laughed bitterly. "Good luck. You don't know how deep this goes." "I think I do," Rachel replied, "but I also think you have something that could stop him." Jason hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pressed a small USB into her hand. "Everything I've saved, files, transfers, conversations, use it before they use me." Before she could respond, a voice echoed from the hallway. "Jason, Mr. Grant wants to see you in his office." Jason stood quickly and straightened his uniform. "Be careful," he whispered. "They're watching everything." Rachel tucked the USB into her pocket just as the door opened and two stern-faced men entered Marcus and Robert Mitchell's financial enforcers. "There you are," Marcus said, his tone tight with false cheer. "Mr. Grant would like to speak with you about your future." As Jason was led away, Rachel slipped back onto the sales floor, her mind racing. She now held the key to exposing everything, but Mitchell was closing in, and fast. She didn't have days anymore. She had hours, and as if to confirm her fear, her phone buzzed in her pocket. An unknown number. The message was short, chilling. "Mrs. Collins, your involvement has been noted. Step back, or your employees will suffer the consequences." Rachel's blood ran cold. The threat was direct and unmistakably personal. She looked up and spotted Emily helping a customer at the register. Andrew was folding clothes nearby. Maggie walked past carrying a box of returns. They were all targets now. Collateral damage if Mitchell chose to retaliate. The reality settled like lead in her chest. This wasn't a corporate scandal anymore. It was a battlefield. "Natalie," she whispered into her earpiece, "we've been made." Natalie's voice crackled back, I figured. "They're scrubbing files already. You need to get out of there now." But Rachel stood her ground. "I'm not running. I'm protecting them. Get Rodriguez's team ready. We go public tomorrow." There was a pause. "You sure you want to do this?" "I have to," Rachel said. "This is bigger than stock options or board seats. It's about people. It's about every person he stepped on to climb the ladder." That night, Rachel met Natalie at a small cafe far from any Collins retail location. They reviewed the contents of the USB together, hundreds of documents, transaction records, emails implicating Mitchell and his inner circle. "This is enough to bury him," Natalie said, scrolling through the files. "But he's panicking. That makes him unpredictable and dangerous," Rachel added, "but not untouchable." She pulled out her phone and called Michael Rodriguez. "We're moving forward. I want your legal team, your forensic accountants, and your FBI contacts on site tomorrow night. Mitchell's trying to close the deal early." After the call, Rachel leaned back exhausted, but determined the threat had been made. The line had been drawn. Mitchell thought fear would keep her quiet, but he had underestimated the woman who built Collins Retail from the ground up. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The apartment was dim except for the soft glow of laptops and monitors lining the table like a command center for justice. Rachel sat at the edge of her seat, her fingers tapping nervously against a mug of untouched tea. Natalie was across from her, hunched over a keyboard, eyes darting between screens. The USB drive Jason had handed over was currently being cloned, encrypted, and catalogued. File after file scrolled past spreadsheets labeled budget revisions, email threads marked internal transfers, and folders named with innocuous terms that hid something far more sinister beneath. "Got something?" Natalie said, suddenly pulling one window into full screen. It was a memo buried deep, signed by Marcus Webb and approved by Mitchell Grant, rerouting funds from employee bonus allocations to non-disclosed executive incentives. Rachel leaned closer. "That's the first thread," she murmured. "Keep pulling." It didn't take long before the real picture emerged. Line items had been renamed, adjusted, or outright fabricated. Mitchell and his team had siphoned funds from operational budgets under the guise of restructuring. Performance reviews had been manipulated to justify layoffs, painting seasoned employees as liabilities. There were entire divisions marked underperforming despite exceeding sales goals. "This is manufactured failure," Natalie said in disbelief. "He created a narrative of decline so the board would feel pressured to sell." Rachel nodded, the weight of it crushing. And the people who got fired, they were the ones who questioned it, who stood up, who noticed. She swallowed hard. "This isn't just corporate greed, it's character assassination on paper." Natalie clicked into another folder. Dozens of names appeared, each one linked to internal complaints, followed by reassignment orders or terminations. The pattern was unmistakable. The data was damning, but it still wasn't enough. Rachel needed proof that Mitchell had orchestrated every move. She needed links between him and Summit Equity Group, and most importantly, she needed to know when he planned to close the deal. That question was answered a few minutes later when Natalie cracked into a restricted calendar file tied to Robert Taylor's company account. Here she said, "Summit Equity Final Negotiations, Four Seasons Hotel." Tomorrow night, Rachel felt her stomach drop. "He's pushing it forward. He wants this done before we can act." Natalie looked up, concern etched into her face. "You know what that means, right? He's clearing house tomorrow. Files, people, anything that could tie him to this will be gone." Rachel stood and began pacing. "Then we can't wait. We don't just need to catch him. We need to catch him in the act. Live with witnesses." Just as she began outlining next steps, Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. A message from Jason. "They're watching me. Tomorrow's the last chance." She stared at the screen, the simple sentence hitting her like a punch. He knew Mitchell was onto him too, and Jason had just crossed a line from silent participant to potential whistleblower. "He's in danger," Rachel said quietly. "We all are," Natalie replied. "But that's why this has to be perfect." Rachel's mind raced. They would need legal representation on standby media contacts, ready and federal eyes in the room. It was no longer enough to have proof in hand. The exposure had to be public, unignorable. She picked up the phone and called Michael Rodriguez again. "Tomorrow night," she said, "the Four Seasons, get your team ready." We're bringing it all into the light. Rachel barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw spreadsheets filled with lies and faces of the employees. Mitchell had discarded Emily, who had whispered that the company used to mean something. Andrew punished for asking a simple question. Maggie forced a smile through corporate cruelty, and Jason torn between survival and redemption. In the early hours, she prepared a folder labeled Board Emergency Review and began compiling a presentation of her own. Natalie helped gather the cleanest, most irrefutable evidence, screenshots, audio clips, bank records. "You're not just taking back the company," Natalie said. "You're exposing a system built on fear." Rachel nodded, but said nothing. This wasn't about glory. It was about responsibility, about fixing the damage done in her absence. At dawn, she emailed the entire board. "Emergency session required. Critical review of recent operations. Meeting tomorrow morning in person only. The sun rose over Seattle like a spotlight on a stage, illuminating the final act of a months-long betrayal. The city stirred around them, but inside that apartment, the air felt sacred, like the quiet before a storm. Rachel closed her laptop and looked at Natalie. "Thank you for believing in this." In me, Natalie smiled. I believed in Collins Retail before it had a logo. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason. "I'll be there, whatever happens." Rachel held the phone tightly, then whispered to herself, "So will I?" Tomorrow would be the moment it all turned. Mitchell's empire built on deception would crumble, but only if they moved fast, clean, and without hesitation. Rachel took one final look at the USB drive now duplicated and backed up in 4 secure locations. The truth was ready. Now it was time for the world to hear it. The Grand Royal Hotel shimmered under a canopy of city lights, its glass facade casting reflections like illusions perfect for a night built on deception. Inside, the Summit Equity Acquisition Gala had already begun. The ballroom buzzed with soft jazz champagne flutes and polished smiles. Mitchell Grant stood near the front of the room, commanding attention in a dark, tailored suit, his voice polished and persuasive. Behind him, a presentation looped on giant screens displaying declining performance charts and projections that made Collins Retail look like a dying animal begging to be rescued. In one corner, Summit executives nodded in calculated agreement. Unseen by them all, Rachel Collins stood in a service corridor just beyond the ballroom, dressed once more in the disguise of Karen Blake wig glasses and all. She took a breath as Natalie's voice came through the earpiece. "FBI agents are staged in the lobby and kitchen. Rodriguez's legal team is ready. You're clear to go." Rachel closed her eyes, steadying herself. Then she opened the door and stepped inside. The moment she entered, the air shifted. No one recognized her at first. She walked along the wall unnoticed among servers and assistants, but as Mitchell gestured toward a stack of unsigned contracts and declared, "By this time tomorrow, Collins Retail will begin a new chapter." Rachel's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "Not unless you forged my signature, Mitchell." The crowd turned. For a heartbeat, silence hung like a held breath. Mitchell's face drained of color as Rachel stepped fully into the light, removed her wig and glasses, and stood tall. "Surprised to see me?" she asked. "Your surveillance team clearly missed a few things." A ripple of gasps traveled through the room. Summit executives looked between Rachel and Mitchell. Stunned Miss Wells. Rachel addressed the lead negotiator. "You're attempting to purchase a company that's been manipulated into appearing broken by the very man leading this deal." Rachel walked to the presentation screen and tapped her phone. Instantly, the ballroom's monitors lit up, not with Mitchell's doctored charts, but with damning evidence, emails detailing bonus reallocation, bank records of offshore transfers, falsified performance reviews. One by one, Rachel revealed the paper trail, each document authenticated and time-stamped. Then came the final blow, Jason's USB drive. Rachel played an audio clip of the Harborview meeting. Mitchell's voice clear and unmistakable. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. The board will beg to sell. Murmurs broke into outrage. Summit executives stepped back. Some looked physically ill. Mitchell lunged toward the laptop. "You have no right." He started, but was stopped by a new presence at the ballroom doors. 2 FBI agents, their jackets open just enough to reveal their badges, stepped forward. Mitchell Grant, one said firmly, "FBI, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted sale of stolen corporate assets." Mitchell froze his composure, unraveling. "You can't. This is all circumstantial," he shouted, looking to Marcus and Robert, who had already begun to back away. Actually, a calm voice interrupted. "We have audio, video, and digital records courtesy of Mr. Reed." Jason stepped out from the edge of the crowd, holding a printed copy of the USB file index. And I'm willing to testify Mitchell's rage turned to panic. "You coward! I gave you everything." Jason's voice didn't waver, and you were going to throw me under the bus. As the FBI agents moved in to cuff Mitchell, Rachel stood still, watching her former protégé be led away in stunned silence. He had built his empire on manipulation and fear, and now before the very people he sought to impress, he was exposed for exactly what he was. "Let's go," one agent said. The ballroom doors closed behind them, and the quiet that followed was heavier than any applause. Rodriguez stepped forward, next flanked by board members who had just been briefed in the adjacent conference room. After reviewing the full scope of evidence, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Mitchell Grant's position and rescind all pending acquisition discussions with Summit. Equity, Rachel gave a small nod, but her attention was already turning toward the employees gathered near the back, Emily, Andrew, Maggie, all of whom had come to witness this moment. She walked to the center of the room, taking the microphone Mitchell had used moments earlier. Collins Retail, she said, was built on the belief that people matter, that hard work should be rewarded, that integrity isn't optional. Somewhere along the way, we lost that, and I take responsibility for leaving a space where someone like Mitchell could thrive, but that ends tonight. Everyone who was wrongfully terminated will be reviewed for reinstatement, stolen bonuses will be repaid, and we are installing an entirely new oversight system. She paused, her voice tightening with emotion. This company was never just about profits. It was about people, about potential, and that starts now with every one of you. A quiet round of applause began, then grew louder, filling the space where fear once lingered. Rachel stepped down, and employees gathered around her not as subordinates, but as allies, hopeful and re-energized. Natalie joined her with a quiet smile. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Rachel replied. "We did." As the crowd began to disperse and the legal team began coordinating next steps with federal authorities, Rachel allowed herself a breath, a single moment to take it all in. She thought of her father, who had helped her start it all, of every late-night shift she'd worked in those early years, and of the vow she'd once made to build something lasting, something real. Tonight she hadn't just kept that promise, she'd reclaimed it. 3 months had passed since the storm broke, and slowly, steadily Collins Retail began to breathe again. The flagship store, once a symbol of disillusionment and fear, now hummed with a very different energy. The punitive quotas were gone, the clipboard drills, the humiliating performance boards, and the endless strikes had been wiped clean like dust from a forgotten window. In their place, something human was returning. Rachel stood near the front of the store, one quiet morning, sipping coffee, as she watched a new associate being mentored by a more experienced team leader. They laughed over a stubborn register glitch, and Rachel smiled. It wasn't just the systems that had changed, it was the air itself. She had made a promise to rebuild, and now step by step she was keeping it. The first order of business after Mitchell's arrest had been reinstatement. Every employee who had been terminated under suspicious circumstances received a formal review. Most were offered their jobs back along with full back pay and bonuses. Many returned not just for the money, but for the principle. Others had moved on, but wrote letters of thanks, grateful to know the truth had surfaced. Rachel made each reinstatement personal, shaking hands, listening to stories, and apologizing where it mattered. "You shouldn't have had to wait for justice," she told one former manager who had been fired for declining performance despite leading the region in sales. "But I'm here now, and I won't look away again." The emotional weight of those moments humbled her. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about strategy decks or expansion plans. It was about showing up when people needed you most. Rachel didn't rebuild alone. Natalie was officially appointed as the company's new Vice President of People and Culture, a newly formed role designed to protect what had nearly been lost. She spearheaded the company's transparency initiatives, which included quarterly open forums with employees, anonymous whistleblower hotlines, and a leadership feedback system that allowed store-level staff to rate their district and regional managers. Jason, having testified publicly against Mitchell and helped provide key evidence, was given a second chance, not out of pity, but out of purpose. Rachel offered him the newly established role of Director of Internal Ethics and Accountability. "You saw what was happening and didn't walk away," she told him. "Now I need you to make sure no one ever has to go through that again." He accepted the position with quiet gratitude. Emily, once a cashier with tired eyes and a breaking spirit, now led the flagship store as its new operations manager, guiding others with a mix of compassion and strength that no spreadsheet could ever measure. Gone was the culture of fear that had taken root under Mitchell's regime. In its place, a new mindset emerged, built on listening, learning, and leading with empathy. Rachel knew trust wouldn't be restored overnight. But every small act, every fair schedule posted on time, every meeting where feedback wasn't just tolerated, but invited, every employee recognized for effort rather than punished for metrics began to stitch the soul of Collins Retail back together. Transparency wasn't just a buzzword anymore. Rachel made financial reports available to all department heads, not just senior executives. Profit-sharing programs were piloted in high-performing stores. Employee development funds were expanded, offering tuition assistance, wellness stipends, and childcare grants. Rachel visited stores weekly, walking the aisles, shaking hands, listening not as a CEO making a statement, but as a founder rediscovering her roots. The company also underwent a brand refresh, not to distance itself from the scandal, but to reclaim its identity. The new tagline was simple and powerful: Collins Retail, built on people. The phrase appeared on every store window, but more importantly, it echoed in every internal meeting and hiring interview. During orientation, new employees watched a video narrated by Rachel herself, telling the story of how corruption nearly stole the heart of a company and how the courage of everyday workers saved it. That video wasn't just for training, it was a symbol of the values Collins Retail would uphold moving forward. Rachel made it clear success wasn't worth chasing if it came at the cost of dignity. Profit would never again be pursued without principle. On a crisp Friday afternoon, Rachel stood in the break room of the flagship store, now redesigned with warm lighting, cushioned chairs, a coffee bar, and a quiet corner for rest and reflection. A group of employees gathered to celebrate Emily's birthday, the sound of laughter rising like music. Rachel leaned against the doorway, heart full. She thought of where they'd been just months ago, of Jason shredding documents, in a panic of Emily, whispering warnings of Maggie, wondering if she'd ever feel safe again. Now they were building something better. Not perfect. Not without challenges, but honest, human. "Real ready for the next round?" Natalie asked, stepping beside her with a stack of leadership reports. Rachel nodded. "Always. Because this time, we're doing it right." As the sun poured through the break room window, lighting the faces of the team she'd nearly lost, Rachel knew this was the real victory. Not the headlines, not the arrests, but the healing and the future they were creating together. The transformation wasn't just cosmetic, it was cultural. After months of rebuilding, Collins Retail began to shine in a way that wasn't about polished glass storefronts or trending campaigns. It was something deeper, something that couldn't be captured in a quarterly report. Employees walked taller, smiles were real, and behind every customer interaction was a quiet but powerful truth. This company had survived betrayal, reckoned with its failures, and chosen a different future. At the center of that future stood the new cornerstone of the brand, the Collins Pathways program. Designed to offer more than just employment, the initiative focused on long-term support for staff, continuing education, childcare, assistance, mental health resources, and true scheduling flexibility. "We don't just build careers here," Rachel said during the program's launch. "We build lives." The rollout of the program was deliberate and heartfelt. Each store was given autonomy to tailor offerings based on the needs of their team. Some prioritized language classes for immigrant employees. Others offered scholarships for part-time staff to attend night school. In larger locations, on-site childcare was piloted, staffed by certified professionals and open during extended hours. Shift leaders were trained not just in logistics, but in human-centered management, how to listen, how to resolve conflict, how to recognize signs of burnout. For many employees, this wasn't just a benefit, it was a lifeline. For single parents, aspiring students, and those re-entering the workforce, Collins Retail was no longer a place to get by. It had become a place to grow. Inside the new corporate headquarters, a renovated warehouse transformed into a glass-filled, plant-lush space, Rachel often worked from a transparent office with no doors. A daily schedule of open hours allowed anyone from janitors to district leads to walk in and talk. She listened more than she spoke, a habit she had trained herself into after the reckoning. And when she did speak, it was with clarity and warmth. "I don't want anyone working here to feel invisible," she told a group of new hires one afternoon, because when people feel unseen, that's when things go wrong, not just for them, but for all of us. The entire structure of Collins Retail had been rebuilt around one guiding belief: a business rooted in ethics, equity, and empathy can outperform one built on fear and control. One of the most symbolic projects Rachel led was the creation of a new onboarding experience. Every new employee, regardless of rank or department, would begin their journey by watching a 15-minute video recorded in Rachel's voice, filmed throughout the store's warehouses and training centers where her legacy had come to life. The video opened not with stats or sales figures, but with her confession. "I almost lost the company I loved because I stopped paying attention to the people inside it." She detailed how Mitchell's corruption grew unchecked, how good people were silenced, and how it nearly cost them everything. But then she shifted her tone steady and hopeful. "This company survived because of people who spoke up, who didn't give in. That's our legacy, and that's why you're here, to help us protect it and to make it stronger." The video became a cornerstone, not just of training, but of the culture. Employees referenced it, often quoting phrases like, "Ethical business isn't just the right thing, it's the most powerful thing, and success that costs us our soul isn't success at all." Teams began hosting monthly pathway talks where staff could share stories of growth ideas for improvement or personal wins inside and outside of work. Recognition shifted away from rigid metrics and toward impact. How someone helped a struggling teammate, improved a customer experience, or led with kindness during a tough day. Even customers began to notice. Reviews flooded in, praising not just the products, but the people. "It feels different here." One woman wrote, "Like everyone actually wants to be here, like it means something." One late afternoon, Rachel walked through the flagship store and paused by a new installation, the Wall of Futures. It showcased photos of employees reaching milestones, earning a degree, buying a first home, teaching their kids how to read. In the center was a simple plaque, engraved with the company's renewed mission: "We don't just sell things, we invest in people. We grow futures together." Rachel stood silently for a moment, then turned to leave, passing Emily as she trained a young recruit and Jason, reviewing an internal audit report with a confident smile. The legacy they were building wasn't in glass towers or press releases. It lived in the people, resilient, valued, and empowered. And as the sun dipped through the windows and cast long beams of light across the store, Rachel Collins knew in her heart this was the company she had always dreamed of. And this time she wouldn't just protect it, she would ensure its values lived on for generations to come. If this story moved, you share it at Deep Inside HQ. We believe powerful change begins with truth, and that behind every policy, every corporation, every uniform, there's a human story waiting to be heard. Subscribe to our channel for more real-world narratives that challenge injustice, celebrate resilience, and uncover the moments that truly matter. Leave a comment, tell us your thoughts, and join a growing community committed to empathy, accountability, and doing the right thing, even when it's hard, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs stories that make us feel, think, and act.